Hello, and welcome to EPR with your favorite environmental nerds, Nic and Laura. On today's episode, Nic and I talk about mitigation banking. I talk to Dayna Winchell and Amanda Dwyer from Westervelt Ecological Services about mitigation and conservation banking, company culture, and ecological work. And finally, the world's largest protected wetland is Llanos de Moxos, which is found in Bolivia. It is more than 17 million acres, roughly equal in size to North Dakota.
Wow.
Dang.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, my wow was for you getting the pronunciation correct. That was you nailed it. And didn't even sweat.
Hello, español un poquito.
I think that's yes. Sí. Sí. Get that music. The Northwest Association of Environmental Professionals is hosting their next happy hour on Thursday, July 6th from 5:30 to 7:30 Pacific at Rogue Eastside Pub and Pilot Brewery. NWAEP's free monthly First Thursday networking mixers are open to both NWAEP members and non-members and are a great opportunity for you to meet, network, stay informed, and stay connected with local environmental professionals. NWAEP provides some snacks and gives each member 2 free drink tickets. For more information, visit their website at www.nwaep.org.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
It does sound fun. I wish I was there. Today's episode is sponsored by Westervelt Ecological Services, which is an environmental mitigation company based in the U.S. They specialize in providing ecological restoration, conservation, and mitigation banking services. They work with both public and private sector clients to address environmental challenges and achieve regulatory compliance. WES undertakes a variety of projects related to wetland and stream restoration, habitat enhancement, and species conservation. Their initiatives often involve the creation, enhancement, or preservation of natural habitats to offset the environmental impacts of development projects. These efforts aim to restore or improve the ecological functions of ecosystems, enhance wildlife habitats, and promote biodiversity. The company operates across multiple regions in the United States. WES has projects across the country, including California, Colorado, Nebraska, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee. They work collaboratively with landowners, agencies, and stakeholders to design and implement effective ecological solutions that balance economic development with long-term environmental stewardship. Check them out at www.wesmitigation.com. Special thanks to WES for sponsoring today's episode at the highest level. If you would love to sponsor an episode yourself, please check us out at www.environmentalprofessionalsradio.com.
Welcome back to EPR. Today we have Amanda Dwyer, a Sales and Business Development Manager at Westervelt Ecological Services, and Dayna Winchell, a Conservation Planner also at WES. Welcome, Amanda and Dayna.
Thanks. Hi, thank you.
It's great to have you here. And also you guys are sponsoring the episode. Super, super appreciate that. So we're going to dive into your backgrounds, your work, and then also we'll talk about WES a little bit. It's been a while since we had 2 guests on at once, so I want to give our listeners a chance to kind of recognize your voices. I've listened to some other podcasts where they have multiple people and I'm like, who's talking? I don't know what's happening. So let's start off with what each of you does. So Dayna, can you maybe explain what a conservation planner does on a daily basis?
Yeah, so as a conservation planner, I'm a project manager on a variety of our projects that we're looking to get approved by various agencies, whether it's California Department of Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Army Corps of Engineers. It just kind of depends on what the project is. But what I do is work with the agencies to get our long-term management plans approved and everything kind of that we need to get our mitigation site or conservation site approved by the agencies so we can enter into our long-term management.
Very cool. Thank you. And Amanda, describe your role as a sales and business development manager. I imagine it's a little different.
Yeah, so it's almost on the opposite side of Dayna and more outward facing. I'm working with clients who have permits from the regulatory agencies in hand, and they need to compensate for impacts that they're having to special status species habitat, wetlands, riparian, that sort of stuff. And I'll walk them through the different options that WES may have to help them meet their needs and allow their projects to move forward with construction. And a lot of that is working closely with Dayna and our other conservation planners and making sure I'm representing our properties correctly and working with the client, understanding what their needs are and how we could meet those.
Awesome. And I kind of love this. I'm going to give a shout out to Sarah Correa, who put this together and reached out about sponsoring and asking if, some folks from your actual work could come on here. And I love the idea that we're talking to both of you from both sides of this, especially for people who are listening that are looking for jobs and don't necessarily know what all the different roles are. So from, which one of you wants to start first, but tell me about your backgrounds and what led you to working at Wes. And Amanda, do you have an environmental background or is it more from the sales aspect?
I do have an environmental background. I got my degree from UC Davis in 2014 in environmental policy analysis and planning. And I started my career at the state, first at the State Water Resources Control Board, reviewing applications for Clean Water State revolving funds for improvements to wastewater treatment plants or water recycling facilities, reviewing them for impacts to cultural resources, species habitat, wetlands, everything kind of environmental there. I then switched to California Department of Water Resources, working on restoration projects in the Yellow Bypass to improve connectivity for salmonid populations largely. And there I did everything from writing California Environmental Quality Act documents, applying for permits from the regulatory agencies, and doing biological monitoring during construction, which is what brought me to West, because I had to get familiar with the species that we were monitoring for. And the way you do that is, or the way we did it at DWR, is going to mitigation banks like Wes's, where the species are going to exist. So you don't waste a day out in the field and you don't get to actually see a giant garter snake or a California tiger salamander. And going to those properties, realizing that restoration and conservation is such a broad term, and there's companies that just focus on doing restoration. And that's what brought me to Wes. Having my background as both almost a regulator and a project applicant needing to find mitigation has been really helpful on the business development side, because I can talk to clients on what they need and either walk them through what permits they need to apply for before they come to me, or really have an understanding of what they're impacting and how we can help them.
Awesome. Sounds like you've got some really cool jobs. Circle back to that a little bit more when we get into job advice. Dayna, how about you?
Yeah, so I have an undergrad degree in biology, and then I have a master's degree in conservation biology. Always wanted to work in some sort of environmental field. So I was working for a while as a biologist for local environmental consulting firms here in California, where I would go out and do surveys looking for endangered species, wetlands, kind of any protected habitat or species that might affect a project, whether it be a road project, bridge project, any sort of kind of variety of projects that, you may have developing in the area. And based on the results of those surveys, I would help the client with their permits to get through the CEQA process and their just regulatory permits to get their project approved to move forward. And that's how I came across Wes, is I would have to reach out if my clients were impacting habitat for an endangered species or wetland areas. You have to do some sort of compensatory mitigation. And so I would call Wes and ask if they had credits available, or kind of look for what's that mitigation solution that they could provide for my client. So Amanda wasn't here when I was a consultant, but I would typically be calling Amanda now at this point and tell her what we need, what we're looking for. And in doing that, I really got to enjoy the people I called during the time, but I liked the idea of moving more on the conservation side of things. And I like that Wes, we own our property, we conserve the lands, the habitat, the species. And so kind of over a few years, I just started getting more and more interested in what we do here.
That's awesome. So let's talk about that a little bit more, because I could just get the feeling from the emails from Sarah, and I don't know, I just get this, you can kind of get a vibe from a company and from people who work at it that it, has a great culture and stuff. So let's, again, whichever one of you wants to jump in, but you guys are in California too, right? So let's talk about where the property is and kind of the different types of projects you do there.
We have properties across most of California. We're based in Sacramento. We have properties from about 2.5 to 3 hours north of here, and then about 4.5 hours south of here. So it's a variety of properties that some of them are just straight species conservation. We went out, we found a great piece of land that we know protected species are using, they're breeding, they're all over the property. We purchase it and we place a conservation easement over the property and just maintain it really typically in the same way that property has naturally been occurring. Other properties that we own may be lands that maybe used to be wetlands or vernal pools that were converted maybe to pasture, ag land, and we have purchased it and we convert it back to what it was or enhance maybe the features that are existing there and then continue to maintain those for whether it's just waters or maybe we have vernal pool fairy shrimp and also protected species on the properties.
Yeah,
That's
and
awesome.
to add on to that real quick, our business is largely driven by regulatory drivers. So like Dayna was mentioning, permits that clients get that they need to compensate for their impacts. And California is a very strict regulatory market here. But we do also have offices across the country. We've got an office in Colorado. We've got offices in Nashville, Alabama, and Florida. And we've got properties in several states across those doing similar work, largely more on the wetlands and river side, versus California does have a lot of conservation and species mitigation, but we're all across the country.
That's awesome. I find that really fascinating. I feel like most of the mitigation work and the lands that I had worked with in Florida in the past were usually like government owned. Is this like a unique business model? And like, how long has West been doing this?
West has been around since 2006, but this business model has been around for quite a bit longer. It's really driven by the 2008 rule by the U.S. Army Corps that put in a ranking system almost for how people with permits should do their mitigation, with mitigation bank credits being the number one option, in-loop fee programs being the number two option, and permitting responsible mitigation being the second. And the founders of West all used to work at a different mitigation company and wanted to branch off and start their own, and partnered with the Westervelt company, which is based in Alabama. It's a 140-something-year-old timber company that has been in paper and timber that whole time and has really invested in the lands and understands that land is a long-term process and it's not just something you quickly turn over. So mitigation and restoration really fit with their vision on what they wanted for the properties that they were acquiring. So a few of our properties in the Southeast are Westervelt company properties that we've been able to do mitigation on for the Westervelt company or other clients. But I know in the industry at large, there's an interest in looking at mitigation on public lands as well.
And just to follow up on that, it's been a business model, as Amanda said, that's been around for quite some time. I find that it is a small niche kind of company. We're not a nonprofit. We're not a regulatory agency, but we're also not a consultant. So we work with everyone. We work with all those different groups, but we kind of fall somewhere in the middle. That's kind of what's fun about it too, is we like to do something just a little bit different.
Yeah, I totally get that. When I worked at the Environmental Protection Commission in Hillsborough County, my department, my specific office was the only habitat restoration non-regulatory in the agency. And so we got to do all the fun stuff while everyone else was doing the permits. And of course, we worked with them directly. But yeah, so I get that vibe as well. So let's talk about the projects, because if someone's listening and they're like, okay, mitigation banks, first of all, don't know what that is. And then you're talking about like a client, who's a client, and then the projects themselves. You mentioned that, land projects, mitigation, they're not short-term things. This is a long-term thing. So if a client does a transaction with you, and then what does that look like for someone who maybe doesn't have any idea what mitigation banking kind of is?
Well, a client, mitigation banking, as Amanda said, there's a few different kind of the 3 steps we can do. One of the biggest things we do, I'd say, is our mitigation banks, conservation banks. I think the simplest way to kind of explain it is, we've got this property, we have it approved as a conservation or a mitigation bank, and a client who's, through their permits is required to offset the impacts of their project. It can be, we work with California Department of Transportation, Department of Water Resources, developers may call us, solar companies, we're getting all kinds of companies call us for project impacts. And, they may impact a half an acre of species habitat that they need to offset. I mean, are they going to go buy a half an acre, put a conservation easement on it, and be responsible for it long-term in management and perpetuity? That's a lot for a half an acre for a company. So what they do is they call us, and if we have the property with the correct habitat, they purchase towards a half an acre of the land of the contribution. And that takes the responsibility off of them. They can satisfy their mitigation, go forward with their project, and not really have to think about it again while we continue to use those funds to help maintain that land in perpetuity, as we said we would under the conservation easement.
Yeah. Amanda, did you want to add to that?
No, I think that was great. Yeah, we work with kind of everyone that's having an impact, whether it's infrastructure or residential development. Yeah.
So once you do the initial transaction with them, it's kind of on you to do the continued maintenance. Do they have any reporting requirements or need to check back in to make sure that, what they've handed off to you is still working or functional?
Not when they're purchasing mitigation bank credits. They usually have to supply the bill of sale and payment receipt to the regulatory agencies to prove that they've actually purchased these credits, but the long-term management and monitoring falls on us.
Great. All right. Thank you for answering that question in detail. And let's talk about the actual projects then. What have been some of your favorites?
Dayna, you can start.
There's a variety of really good ones. One that I think both Amanda and Sarah know which one I'm going to probably go with. It was a conservation bank. It was the first project that was given to me when I started at Westervelt almost 5 years ago. It's over 2,400 acres of land that has 5 endangered, or listed species, living, breeding, and everything on it. It's a large piece of land, which is great. A lot of our properties are smaller. 2,400 acres is hard to come by a lot of times. It's a big property. But then also to have that many species on it. I remember going out and doing surveys with some of our sub-consultants. And again, coming from consulting and coming out here with like really well-known consultants, we work with some great consultants to do species surveys. And one of the species they found, blunt-nosed leopard lizard, is found to be on the site when it's not expected to be in that range, in that area anymore, is very exciting. But just to see all these different, both aquatic and upland species living on this property together, it's great. And you can go out there, you can wander for a long time, golden eagles fly by as you're out there, and even some species that we are not using as mitigation credits, like tricolor blackbird. I was out there 2 months ago and saw them all. It looks like they were building nests and getting ready for the nesting season. So it was a very cool project to start with. And it was also one that really kind of taught me, obviously, the most about what we do and really what you need to go through to get these projects approved. So it took a little bit longer than we wanted, but I feel like it's kind of become like, I don't know, my favorite one being the first one. And I think just the coolest. It was my first intro into conservation, so it was very cool.
What did that feel like? I know for a lot of people, they start their first job and the first thing you're given can be very daunting, but a 2,400 acre site and you're like, okay, cool, get right on that. Like, what was your thought process? And did you run into any troubles?
Yes. There was a variety of issues, and it comes to show that no project is the same here. Like, you go to think that, we're conserving land, it's easy, sign on a dotted line and it's conserved. But because of the requirements here, particularly with the California Environmental Quality Act and the standards that we're held to, because we're offsetting habitat for projects that we don't know what those projects are yet. So we have to offset with the highest quality habitat for these species. We can't have low quality habitat that offsets for higher quality. And so it takes more time, and you have to, prove a couple years of breeding for some of the species, and you have to work through changes in, regulatory people that you're working with. You can be a little, a year or two into a project and you get a new project manager at the agency and you almost start brand new. So, we thought we were going to get this project approved in a year or two, and it ended up taking close to 4. So there was a lot of learning during that time. But when it got approved, we all celebrated.
Awesome. Amanda, anything you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I agree with Dayna that the property that she was talking with, our Ecological Conservation Bank, is this really magical property that's been a huge help for folks in the area, largely infrastructure driven, that need to figure out what they're doing, because these infrastructure projects, some of them are emergency projects, some of them are helping with meeting water resource and making it more reliable, and needed projects that had to go forward and were having these impacts that we were able to help out with.
And on that note, water, in California, I don't know if everyone knows, has been such a hot topic here with droughts and everything. So these water infrastructure projects were huge, and this was necessary to keep the projects moving forward. So we enjoy that.
Yeah, I think that is really great, is to talk a little bit about the California-ness of some of your projects, some of the species that you're talking about. I would love to know what they look like. They sound really cool. And Amanda, it sounds like you have some favorites. What are some of your favorite species you get to work with or see?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite that I don't get to see too often anymore is salmon, just with my background from Department of Water Resources, and seeing the difference in the restoration sites I was doing there compared to the restoration sites that West does. At DWR, we were largely limited by the infrastructure in place that was needed to protect communities and as well as water deliveries and that sort of stuff. So making sure species could still access their natural habitats, but limited by human development, versus West, we're turning it back into a natural system. And we've got our Cosumnes Floodplain Mitigation Bank, which was the first property I went to when I started with West. And it's just really cool to see this large open space. I think Cosumnes is 200, 300 acres, somewhere around there. This giant floodplain that has provided great connectivity in Sacramento County for listed fish species, as well as providing connectivity to other conserved areas and kind of making that map bigger. But I think some other fun species we get to work with, California tiger salamanders, those are really fun. We've got some stickers, Laura, that we'll have to send you, because we've got a graphic designer who makes them super cute. I'm not a huge fan of snakes, but our giant garter snakes, I've been told, are, puppy dogs of snakes, and they're really cool. They're facing a lot of impacts to their habitat. So for West to be able to provide some of the last areas and places that GGS can take refuge, and it's really cool.
That's really,
and they're really hard to survey for and detect as well. And one thing that right now is the time of year we do a lot of our species surveys on our properties. And I think twice in the last 2 weeks, we've had a subconsultant go out and find a couple of giant garter snakes on our properties. So it's nice when you can do that and see they are using the land, they are using the habitat we restored for them. And so we always get excited when we hear about that.
Okay, we have garter snakes here and I love them, but I wouldn't call them giants. How big is a giant one?
They're not very giant.
Yeah, I think like 6 feet is like the biggest.
Oh, wow.
Maybe. I don't even know.
That's pretty rare, I think, to find now.
Yeah. They're the ones I've seen. I definitely wouldn't refer to as giant. I think I've heard that historically they were a lot bigger, but just over time they have gotten smaller. But yeah, I wouldn't call them giant in size.
That's funny. Well, that is a perfect segue into our field notes segment, where we ask our guests to talk about their experiences in the field so we can share stories, because that is one thing environmental professionals all have in mostly have in common is experiences and time out in the field and faux pas and scary days and funny days and all kinds of stuff. So how about some? I know you guys must have them. So any particularly scary or fun stories you want to share?
In our habitats, definitely look out for rattlesnakes. I barely see snakes when I'm out doing field work, so I tend to not really look for them. And a couple of years, I almost stepped on a burrow that one was right there. Luckily, a coworker kind of pushed me out of the way and said, "Look out." Fun field work. I went out at one of our properties, I think 2 years ago. It's a property for California red-legged frog. And it's a different kind of property than most of our others. It's kind of up in the foothills a bit. And we went out and did night surveys, looking to see how many adult frogs, tadpoles, juveniles we saw. And, you go out after dark with big old flashlights and walk around and look for them. And you're looking for their eye shine, looking to see if you can see adults on the side of the ponds. And you're just standing there, and we were able to kind of just count like multiple. So we're just walking around for a few hours going from pond to pond and just seeing how great this population is doing on the site. We came across some bear tracks too, it makes me excited. I would have loved to see the bear. Maybe not at night in the dark. Right. And that's it's fun. It's very rare to see that many of the frogs just right there in that area. So I try and get up to that property as much as we can.
Oh, that is fun. How about you, Amanda?
Yeah, I don't get to go out in the field very often anymore. But when I was at DWR, we were doing a training with giant garter snakes. We actually came to one of the Westervelt properties that's got GGS on it, and we were doing surveys to see if we could find any. And like Dayna said, they're really elusive and hard to find. And it was June or July day, you're not in California, but it's been really cold for June and July out here. And it was probably in the 70s. So we were like, we're probably not going to find any snakes. And for whatever reason, I volunteered to go kayaking first, because the way you catch them is in the water, where they primarily are during their active season when they're hunting. And there's these traps that they swim into, and you pull. And I pulled the first trap, and there's a giant garter snake in it. And I mentioned I'm not a huge fan of snakes. So that was kind of scary, but really cool. And he was a small giant garter snake. He was, I don't know, a foot long, maybe, young one. But that was terrifying for me, but really cool that this property was so abundant with snakes that you could even find it on a 70-degree day.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. And I want to circle back to the leadership at Wes. What about your leadership do you think makes it special? And what kind of leadership habits or team culture things could you share that you think would be beneficial for others to either take into their organizations or just know about going into their jobs?
Yeah, I think what's really cool about our leadership is they try to set a precedent of really connecting with staff and making them feel seen and valued. We do a lot of team building activities. And I've been at other companies that when you do team building activities, it feels kind of forced and you're just there. But at least when I'm doing the West team building activities, they're really fun and we all actually enjoy hanging out with each other. And it's cool to see everyone be lighthearted and feeling like a team.
That's interesting. Why do you think it is feeling like it's not forced, or what's different of this compared to the last ones?
I think a lot of it is we try to not be in silos and only working on your little piece of the puzzle. I know I talk with kind of everyone here, from our ecologist to our land steward, the conservation planner. It's like Dayna, getting a sense of what the property is, how we manage it, how I can communicate that best to clients and regulatory agencies. So making sure people are branching out and not just focusing on their little piece.
Yeah, I think we're all very like-minded, which is one thing I like. Like, we all get excited about a property. We all get excited about survey results, versus other fields. You might get into someone who maybe just kind of, who wasn't in an environmental degree, but happened to plug into being a planner or something. We all have that same excitement, which is part of why, we're all in the office as much as possible. We coordinate and collaborate a lot. But I think what's also great is, as you mentioned, our senior leadership is we have these guys who've been doing this for years. And we just hired a few new staff here who just recently started, and our head ecologist, he's been doing this forever. And we tell him he can't retire. He's got all the knowledge, we want to have. He takes his time when a new person starts and takes them out to some of our older properties at one or two, depending on how much time they have, and gives them the background and the history. And, this is how we found the property. These are the hiccups we found, during entitlement. This is what we found during monitoring, and just really shows you it's a lot of brainstorming. No property's the same. And they take the time to do that. One of the guys we just hired came back and was like, other companies might just show you a video or something, and loved the fact that, they take the time to do it. And Amanda says, yeah, we all enjoy being around each other. The site visits we do as an office, everyone just has a good time. And we do every other month at a different property of ours and learn the background, and we just have fun with it.
Yeah, that's really great. It's nice to hear that from an organization. It probably doesn't hurt that the work that you do is just super cool.
Yeah, definitely doesn't hurt.
So do you guys have any other side projects or things that you do with the property?
I was just going to say, we do have programs that, and I'm on the periphery of this. Amanda, you actually probably are more involved. Sarah definitely is. But we do, right now we have like a kids summer camp that goes out to one of our properties. They're out there today to learn, about what we do and nature. Amanda, I think you've been out there when we do it. But I'm a big fan of starting, with STEM and kids in particular with environmental things. Get them started young. I don't know how I was introduced to it as a kid, but I think that's the best way you get them in there. And we do these camps for however many weeks every single year. And I think that's great to have the kids out at our properties learning about what we do.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. The only other one I was going to mention is our partnership with the Association of Women in Water, Energy, and the Environment, AWE. We're sponsoring them this year and looking into more partnership opportunities with them.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sarah actually a few years ago coordinated a kayaking trip with them where we kayaked from one preserve down to our Cosumnes property. And so Sarah, was it maybe 25 women out there and one man who didn't realize it was a women's association that signed up? 35. He didn't realize what he was signing up for. So we had 35 women staff and non-West staff out there that all got in kayaks and kayaked down. And we had box lunch at our property in the shade and stuff. And yeah, and Amanda and I did a wine tasting event with them at this great winery nearby a few weeks ago. And you get everyone from consultants to agencies to us out there. Yeah. So it's a great women's association.
Oh, I love that. That's great.
We have one property that UC Davis comes out and does research and surveys on for fish species. We like to work with any sort of research in the field that we can do and provide for the species, because that helps us manage it long term.
Yeah. And there's the trainings we do, like what I did when I was at DWR, that we welcome people onto our site so that they can get the experience with the species, because they're going to be there.
Yeah. Yeah. That was my first time seeing giant garter snake before I came here. It was one of those trainings at our property.
Same. Yeah.
That's really neat. So I guess what I'm hearing is if you live somewhere near a mitigation banking property or something, or conservation bank, maybe if you have a project you want to do on a cool property, you could reach out to them.
Yeah, reach out to us. We like showing off our site.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. We are running out of time. So you have any upcoming projects that you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, we're working on a lot right now. We've got several projects in Sacramento County working on floodplain restoration, wetland restoration. Dana's working on a couple of cool projects up in the Calusa area for Valley elderberry longhorn beetle, as well as a floodplain restoration site. We've got a conservation property down in Kern County. That's this magical unicorn property that's got 5 different endangered species on it, and 2 of them rarely occur in the same area. And we found one piece of property that they do all occur on. So we've got a lot happening right now.
Those sound like really very cool projects.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dana. Did you want to add to that?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, Amanda's right. We do have a lot of things going on right now. So it's very busy, but it's exciting every time we start brand new projects, because it's a whole new, what are we going to see? What's going to come up? But it's just all new excitement knowing it's going to be another project that gets conserved.
Great. All right. Final question. This has been a lot of fun. Where can people get in touch with you?
I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me, Amanda Dwyer, there. You can also reach out at adwyer@westervelt.com if you have any questions from us.
I'm also on LinkedIn, Dayna Winchell. It's Dayna, Dayna. I spell it a little differently, but you can also email me at Westervelt at dwinchell@westervelt.com.
Yeah, and if you don't want to reach out directly to us, feel free to check out our website, westmitigation.com. It was recently revamped, and we've got stuff on there about all of our properties across the country.
And we're also on TikTok, Instagram, everything. We have a great new intern who is, upping the ante with our social media. So it's fun. No staff is safe. They tend to make fun of staff members.
Awesome. I think I've seen some of their work. It's very good.
Probably.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Amanda and Dayna, for being here. This was a lot of fun. And I'm just going to call her out. Thanks, Sarah, for stalking and peeping in on us while we have this conversation. And we'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's our show. Thank you, Dayna and Amanda, for joining us today. Please be sure to check us out each and every Friday. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Bye.
See you, everybody.